Okay, welcome to another video. What we're going to be doing today is taking a look at a distribution that I've never actually used before, so it's making its first appearance on the channel, and that is of course Artix Linux. So it's a rolling release distribution which is based on Arch, however it doesn't come with System D. So if you go onto the download page, there's a few different downloads that we can do, and there is of course 3 different options for the init system, so we can go for OpenRC, Runit or S6. And I also have different desktop versions as well, pre-configured in nice little ISOs. So you can get XFCE, Plasma, Mate, LXQT, LXDE or Cinnamon. Now the version that we are going to be installing and taking a look at today is of course the Cinnamon version with OpenRC, and the ISO size is around about 1.2 GB. We are already in the live environment, and as per usual we're going to install it natively onto the main desktop and take a little look around. So first things first, we're going to double click this icon here to launch the installer, which is Calamares, and it's already got British English all ready to go, so we can press next to go to the next step. So it's got our correct zone of Europe, London, so we can go next. Now for keyboard layout, it's got UK, so we're just going to test that in that box below to make sure everything is set correctly before we go to the next step. Okay, so now we're going to set the partitions for our disks. Of course, we're not using the Brent anymore. We have now swapped over to the Drevo X1 SSD. So we are going to be doing this middle one here, where we're going to erase the disk and let the Calamares installer create the partitions for us. Now it should give us a few different options of how we're going to set up our swap partition. So we can have no swap, a swap no hibernate, a swap with hibernate, and a swap to file. So usually we would do a swap with hibernate, which will give you a nice big swap partition which will enable you to suspend to disk with full hibernation. But today we're going to switch it up and we're going to test out the swap to file, and then that way we can see how large it creates a swap file by default as well. So we're going to go ahead and press that. And now we're not going to have the 3 partitions that we're usually used to, we're just going to have the 2, as of course we're not using a traditional swap partition, we're going to be swapping to a file, which will be in our root file system. So we've got 2 partitions, one for our EFI and then the rest all assigned to the root partition using the ext4 file system. So we're going to go to the next step. Okay, user account time, we're just going to call this one Artix. And as per usual, we're going to be using the same password for the administrator account, and we are going to log in automatically. Now that should be the last step, so as soon as we press install, it's going to start installing, and I'll be back once this has finished. Okay, so the installation has complete, and it actually took no time at all, clocking in at only a couple of minutes. So it's a nice and easy, quick installation using Calamares for Artix Linux. So with that being said, what we're now going to do is reboot and check out our freshly installed Artix Cinnamon desktop. Right, and here we are. So we've booted up for the first time and we've got quite a clean, simple looking Cinnamon desktop, but we'll go through all of that in just a moment. First things first, I do want to see if there's any updates for us to get. So as we are based on an Arch Linux, we're just going to go ahead and do it in the terminal using pacman. So we're going to go sudo pacman-syu, type in a password, and then let's see how much packages we might need to grab. Okay, so there's quite a bit there by the looks of it. Yep, so it's going to be updating quite a lot of packages there, and the total download size for all of those updates is going to be 296 MB. So with that being said, I'm going to pause the video here while this updates, and we'll carry on once this has finished. Okay, so we're all up to date and should be good to go. So what I quickly done post update is I've done a quick reboot so we can see how much RAM we're using on a fresh boot before we make any changes to the system. Unfortunately for me, it does have HDOT pre-installed out of the box, and as you can see there, it's not the lightest ever, but it's not super heavy either, at around about 740 MB on a fresh boot, which is kind of what you'd expect from a standard Cinnamon installation. Now just below it you can see it has made us our swap file of 512 MB, and that of course will be in our root folder. So if you wanted to make a larger one, you could remove that and just create your own swap file if 512 feels a little bit small. Now what we're also going to do is quit out of that, because I do believe we have NeoFetch installed out of the box as well, and we'll quickly have a look at some of the details here from the output. So kernel wise we are running 5.10.8. packages we have 708, so it's quite light on packages, so I'm going to imagine we're going to spend a fair bit of time installing a few packages to get this daily driver ready, but they are all native applications. I don't think we have Flatpak or anything like that installed out of the box. And of course we are using the Cinnamon desktop version 4.8.6, and the default shell is going to be bash. So with that out of the way, we're going to have a quick sort of overview of how the desktop's set up. It's pretty standard stuff, so it shouldn't take us too long. We got some little icons on our desktop, and then at the bottom here is where our standard panel is. No extensions are installed from what I can see, so we have no transparency or anything like that, but we'll set this desktop up to how I like to use things in just a moment. So of course we have our clock and date and calendar, we have our little volume slider. I am going to mute it for now, and let's just see if the keyboard shortcuts are working for that. They are indeed. And then we have our connections, removable drives and printers. To the left of it we have a few quick launches for Nemo and for Terminal, and then we have a show desktop button, so of course when you click that it will then minimize all running applications. And then we have our application launcher. Now we are going to go through these categories, but it really shouldn't take us too long, because like we saw there's only 700 or so packages here. So let's have a look. In accessories we have Archive Manager, we have Calculator, we have disks, which will be GNOME disks, and here we can see the very simple partition layout of just the one EFI and then the one root partition. Let's keep going. We then have Document Viewer, we have LeafPad, which is a nice little text editor, and we have Nemo, of course, is you're going to be a default file manager on pretty much any Cinnamon desktop that you are going to be using. And that's pretty much it. Of course we do have Virtual Keyboard and in the screenshot tool, which I'm going to guess is going to be the GNOME screenshot tool. It is indeed, and it'll be version 3.38.0. So that's pretty much everything that we've got in our accessories folder. Now in graphics we only have the one entry there of Image Viewer. In Internet we have the SSH and VNC server browsers, and then we have quite a lightweight web browser compared to a fully fledged desktop browser like Firefox or Chromium. I've not used Midori too much, but actually it looks quite nice with their default theming. I'm not sure what theme this is, but we'll check it out in a moment. I quite like the circular action buttons there with the minimize, close and maximize. So we're just going to quickly jump onto YouTube while we've got the Midori web browser open and do a quick screen tearing test and make sure that we've got no breaks. At the moment though, just from moving windows around, it's all looking very smooth, so I don't think we're going to have any issues with screen tearing. So we're just going to go to a screen tearing test and have a quick look. Oh, okay, so this browser can't actually play this YouTube video at the moment. I tell you what, we won't worry about that for now because we are going to install Firefox anyway. So for the moment we'll not worry about that and just keep moving forward. So that's everything in Internet. In Office we only have the one program there of a Trill Document Viewer. So if you want like a Office suite, it's probably worth installing something like LibreOffice the Fresh package or whatever alternative you prefer. We're going to go ahead and install LibreOffice Fresh in just a moment. So in sound and video we have MPV Media Player and then the V4L2 test and capture utilities. Now I will be testing some media playback to make sure that's all working out of the box with the default media player, but we are also going to install some things like VLC. So that's pretty much everything in sound and video. So there is no music player, so we might want to install a music player if you have a big local library as well. So in administration you're just going to get standard stuff like HTOP, ZeroConf, System Monitor, Terminal and Users and Groups. Now in preferences this is mainly going to be where you're going to sort of interact with the Cinnamon desktop settings. So if we jump straight into system settings we can have a quick look at what this theme is because I do quite like it. Oh, okay, so it's their own theme called Artix Dark. Do we have any alternatives? No, so there's only a dark. They don't appear to have a light theme pre-installed. Icons or Adwater, and they also have the Mate Faenza, grey and dark as well. Let's just go down to the desktop. So we only have the two themes. We have the standard Cinnamon desktop theme and then we have their own Artix Dark theme, which I actually do quite like, to be honest with you. And while we're here, let's jump into the preferred applications and see what we've got. So you can notice we do have quite a few gaps here and some double ups of programs, so we are going to want to kind of get it daily driver ready with our own preferred application. So File Manager is of course going to be Nemo. Web browser is Midori for the moment, but we are going to install Firefox. We have no applications for mail. We have nothing for documents. Plain text is LeafPad, and then for music and video is MPV. I wouldn't mind that just for video, but for music I'd probably prefer to have an actual music player. And then for photos we have the image viewer, and then source code again is going to be LeafPad. PDFs are a Trill, and then of course Terminal and Calculator. So it's all pretty same defaults for the moment. Let's just see if there's anything else we need to look at in the programs before we make any other changes to our system. No, there's not. Right, so what we're going to do first of all is make it look a bit prettier, and then we're going to start installing some applications and seeing how everything works out of the box. So first things first, we're going to pop open the extensions package, because we are going to get the transparency for our panel, and then we're going to move our panel to the top and install a dock like Plank. So let's just refresh our cache. and it should populate that with some extensions for the Cinnamon desktop any second now. There we go. The only one I'm really going to worry about getting for today is going to be the transparent panel. So we're going to press this button and then jump straight into manage, press that little plus there, and now it's gone pretty much completely transparent with a very small shadow. I actually like it to be on semi-transparent because then I'm going to match that with a theme for the plank dock that we're going to install in just a moment. So what we're going to do though is move it to the top and make it a whole lot smaller because that's rather large for me. It's defaulting on 40 usually. It has indeed, and we're going to bring that all the way down to 28. And then what we're going to do is go into a move, chuck it at the top, and then we are going to go into the edit panel mode because we are going to be removing our group's task list because we don't need that when we're going to be using a dock as well. So we're just going to remove that completely. So we're going to go to panel edit mode, and then we're just going to right click remove grouped list. Okay, right, so that's pretty much all we're going to be doing with our panel, so we can leave panel edit mode now. Right, so I don't remember seeing any software applications for like GUI package installations. Do we have PAMAC? We don't. So what I'm going to quickly do then is install the PAMAC GUI manager, and then we have a nice GUI way to manage our application. So I'll pause the video here. Okay, so what we're doing now is we're just installing the PAMAC GUI with the AUR and all of that good stuff, and then that way we'll have a nice graphical user interface for us to install new packages. So we want to press N for that, and that's going to go through it, and we want to press N for that and Y for that, and now that's going to go ahead and install that, and it's going to grab an additional 42.61 MB to download. So again, we're going to pause the video here and then come back once that's finished. Okay, so that's all done and installed, and I've also gone ahead and installed Flatpak as well because we're going to be using Flatpaks for us to install the Kdenlive video editor in order for me to edit this video. So what we're going to do is go into application launcher, and now let's see if PAMAC's working as it should, and we're going to use this to install a few applications. So if you're someone who likes to use the terminal to install most of your applications, you might not need to go through this step. But if you're someone who likes to have a GUI and something to remind you of when you've got updates ready to go, then it might be worth going ahead and installing this as well. But what we're going to do for now is grab the Firefox web browser. We're going to get Plank, like so, and we're also going to grab, so what else don't we have? We don't have LibreOffice, so we're going to get the LibreOffice Fresh package, like so. And there was one more thing that we didn't have for the preferred applications, wasn't there? We're going to try and get everything kind of daily driver ready. So we don't have a mail application either. So what I'm also going to do is grab Evolution. It should work quite nicely on this desktop. And that's all we're going to do for now. I'm not going to install any additional media programs at the moment because I want to test the out-of-the-box media playback before we start messing around with things like that. So we're going to go ahead and install these packages. It's probably going to take a minute or two, so again I'm going to pause it, but then once that's all done we'll carry on looking around at the desktop. Okay, so all of those packages are now installed, and of course while we're in here, if we wanted to, we can go into the preferences and then enable the AUR, and then we could build packages from the AUR. But for the moment I'm going to leave it disabled because I'm not really too worried about AUR support at the moment. So what we are now going to do is just make sure those programs are all installed as you would expect them to. So we're going to open up our application launcher. We're going to type in Writer to open up LibreOffice, and as this is the fresh package, it will be a nice up-to-date version of 7 point something. So that's version 7.04.2. Now we're going to see if Evolution's installed properly. It has indeed, and there was another thing that we did install, which is Firefox. And while we've now got Firefox installed, we're going to do that screen tearing test that we tried with Midori, because YouTube video playback should work absolutely fine now that we have Firefox ready to go. So we're going to go screen tearing test, and then we're going to jump straight to this one here, and if there's any breaks in the lines, that means there's a problem with the screen tearing and we'll have to mess around with the xorg file. But like I said, just playing around with the windows, it doesn't appear that we have any tearing out of the box. Just going to skip in quickly, and looking absolutely fine out of the box for me on AMD, so we're having no screen tearing issues whatsoever. Now what we're going to quickly do as we've installed Plank is we're going to grab some nice themes for Plank, and then we're going to set the desktop up to how we like to use it, and then we'll test out some things like media playback, and we're also going to install Steam and see how game performance is working on Artix Linux as well. So what I want to do is get a Plank theme, and the one I like to get is Shade. So we're going to go straight to that GitHub, which is right about there, and we're just going to download it as a zip. So we do have an archive manager installed out of the box, so we don't need to worry about anything like that. So we're going to jump straight to that file now, and we're just going to close those tabs and extract this here, because there's only really one theme that I want from here, which is this theme right here. So we're going to cut that to our home folder, go into our hidden files and go .local, share, Plank. Am I being blind? We need to open up Plank first for the first time for it to create the directories for us, and there we go. And now we're going to just copy that straight over to our themes folder. And I've actually been quite liking my dock on the left hand side of the screen lately, so that is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go to preferences, we're going to change the theme to shade now, and the reason why I use shade is because I'm a dark theme kind of guy, and I always have panels with a bit of sort of transparency shadow going on, and that works very nicely with the shade theme on our Plank. So if we move that to the left now, as you can see there, it does look like they were made to go together, and it's quite a nice look, and it's pretty much what I always aim for no matter what desktop I am on. So now that that's all working and we don't need to worry about any of the sort of changing to the desktops, I'm pretty happy with that, so we can keep going forward. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to test some media playback, and we're also going to see if it works with an exFAT external SSD out of the box, or whether we've got to go and play around and mount it ourselves. There we go, so it's mounted that absolutely fine. It's loading the thumbnails for some video files, so let's go ahead and double click that. I'm just going to make sure we are muted, and now we're going to test out some media playback. And there we go, so this is from the Twister video I did not too long ago, and everything is working as it should. So media playback is working absolutely fine out of the box on Artix Linux. So I wonder if we've got some nice sane keyboard shortcut defaults. We do indeed, so we can do window snapping left and right using the super and directional keys, and then it will also restore it to a more normal window size as well. So virtual desktops wise, Cinnamon usually gives you 4 out of the box, so let's test that now, and it's usually by default Control Alt and the directionals, and it is indeed. And if I had the sound on, you would have that rather obnoxious, oh, it's not actually doing the system sound. Okay, I'm quite happy about that. Right, what we're going to do now is also install Steam and see how gameplay is working on Artix Linux. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to jump straight into our Pac-Man mirror list and then just uncomment a line or two, and then we should be good to go to install Steam. So when you're installing Steam on Artix or an Arch-based distribution, you're going to want to head and go... So when you're installing Steam on an Arch-based distribution or Artix, you're going to want to go ahead and open up your pacman.conf file, and then scroll down until you find multi-lib, and then you're going to want to uncomment that, and then that way you can then actually install Steam. So the one we want to get rid of is this one right about here. So we're just going to remove these hashes and uncomment that, and then we should be able to just do a quick update, install Steam, and everything should work pretty much as we would expect it to. Right, so we've installed all of the packages we should need for Steam to work properly. Of course, you could also go the Flatpak route, but I prefer native packages for things like Steam. So what we're going to do is go into our application launcher, and if all's gone to plan, we should then find the Steam runtime. So opening that, of course, it will have to do its initial update, but then after that we should be able to log in and then play some games. Now, we don't have to download any, because what I tend to do for my Steam library, or just Steam games I play quite regularly, because I'm always in different distributions, especially for the channel, I have a drive that just has Steam games on it that I can mount no matter what sort of partition or distribution I'm currently running, and then I don't have to re-download games, and it can share those games across different distributions. And as we have GNOME disks installed out of the box, we don't even have to mess with our FSTab file. We can get GNOME disks to do it for us. So you see this little disk here, which is called Steam. We're going to go and press these little cogs here and go to edit partition. No, we don't. We want to go to edit mount options. We want to remove that, and then we're going to just remove that, and we're going to leave it in MNT. We're just going to call it Steam. And in that way, every time you reboot now, it's going to automatically mount that in MNT/Steam. But we don't have to reboot for it to take effect. We can just press the play button, and that's now going to mount that in the Steam folder. And then when we open up Steam, we can add that to our download libraries, and then it will start sort of populating our Steam library of any games that are on that drive. So what I'm going to do is pause the video here while Steam's doing all of this update, and then we can test out some games to make sure performance is working as we'd expect it, and then we can go on with the rest of the desktop. Right, so it appears that we've managed to install Steam without any issues at all. So what we're going to do now is go straight into our settings, and we are just going to very quickly scroll down to downloads, and we're going to add a new Steam library folder like so, and we're going to add that folder that we have just mounted in MNT, and then that's going to pull all of the games for us and then save us time downloading and installing. So we're going to press close, so that's now picked up 4 games that are already installed, and we're also going to go into Steam Play and enable Steam Play with Proton. So it's going to restart Steam, and then after that's done, it's going to have to do some initial little updates for the games, and then we can test it out. We're probably going to test it out with CSGO, as that's the game I play the most and what I know what to look for as far as frame rates go. So what we're going to do is let these downloads finish and then be back in just a moment. Okay, so we've just jumped into a random online game of CSGO, so it launched absolutely fine with no issues, and now what we're going to do is just have a little run around whilst keeping an eye on that frame rate and seeing if it feels any different or just to what we'd usually expect. And actually, it does feel very smooth. I'm not getting any jerky feelings, and the frame rate, I might even go so far as to say it's a little bit higher marginally than what I'd usually get on my Ubuntu setup, which is quite interesting. But we're going to just play until we get killed. There we go, we got shot through the smoke. But just from first glance there, the actual frame rate and gameplay feels very nice and smooth on Artix Linux, so I wouldn't have any issues actually using this to play any of the games that I do play on a regular. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to install some Flatpak applications, mainly just GIMP and Kdenlive. Make sure that all works, and then we'll wrap it up with some final thoughts. But so far, so good actually. I'm really quite impressed. So what we're going to do is jump onto flathub.org. We're going to copy over the repo that we need to add the FlatHub repo, and then we're going to install a few applications. We're just going to go to quick setup. And it doesn't really matter what we click on here, because all we want to do is copy and paste this over into our terminal. And now that's going to add the FlatHub repo, but as you can see, any Flatpaks installed won't be appearing in our application launcher until we've done a restart. But what we're going to do before we do that is just quickly grab Kdenlive, and then we can do a reboot, make sure everything's working as it should. But I'm really quite liking this actually. I'd be happy to recommend this to anyone who wants an Arch based distro that doesn't quite like Systemd. So we're going to go ahead and grab this little command here, and that's going to go ahead and install Kdenlive for us. So I'm just going to pause the video here while this does that, and we'll be back in just a moment. Right, so our Flatpak installation of Kdenlive is finished without error whatsoever, and it's now appearing on application launcher and launching without issue. And to be fair, everything has kind of been issue free so far with our quick look at Artix, apart from that one YouTube video that didn't want to quite play with Midori, but it did play with Firefox. Now, if you're interested in downloading this, but you quite like a GUI and to be reminded of when you've got an update, it's definitely worth installing the PAMAC GUI, because this little icon up the top right here will turn red when you've got some updates coming through to signify you that there are some updates for you to go ahead and get, and it will save you manually going into a terminal and typing in the command to check if you've got updates to get. So very handy stuff. So what we're going to do to wrap things up is we're going to make sure that we are now daily driver ready. So it's quite a minimal installation out of the box. So we started with around about 708 packages, and we are finishing on around about 886 for Pacman and 6 for Flatpak. Now if we go into our preferred applications, we should no longer have any gaps for any of the applications. So everything is pretty much good to go. The one thing that I might want to go ahead and change, because I do have quite a big offline music library, is getting a proper music player and not using something like MPV. Maybe something like Lollipop might be a good fit for the Cinnamon desktop. So what we're going to do to